Welcome, folks, to our 15th episode of The Virtual Psychiatrist. I am your host, Muhammad Ali Rifai. Let's dive in with a big one. President Trump's new executive order on, wait for it, overcriminalization. This thing's got the potential to be a real game changer, especially for people like you and me who operate in these heavily regulated fields. Chris, did you see this one coming?
I'll admit I was a little surprised, but pleasantly so. You know, this order directly addresses something we've both experienced, the sheer absurdity of dealing with a mountain of regulations that no one, and I mean no one, could possibly master. The Code of Federal Regulations, over 175,000 pages. That's not a book. It's a nightmare for the average person.
It really is. I mean, I've been through this on a personal level. Back when my practice was under fire, and trust me, Chris, you remember those days, I felt like I was thrown into a storm of legal jargon and technicalities. They could have nailed me for some obscure rule I didn't even know existed. If there's anything I learned, it's how brutally unforgiving our system can be.
Exactly. And that's what makes this executive order interesting. It's saying, hey, let's not ruin someone's life over a technical violation. It puts a focus on intent. Did someone knowingly break the law? Did they cause actual harm? If not, why are we talking about criminal penalties? It's a major shift.
So, let's talk about impact. Regulations like this, they hit you if you're a small business owner or even just an independent contractor, right? You don't have the resources to dissect 48,000 sections of gibberish. Meanwhile, the big corporations, they've got entire legal armies to keep them safe. It's a David versus Goliath scenario.
That's a great point. The executive order specifically calls out this gap. It even highlights that large companies benefit from overregulation by fencing out small competitors. I like that the order addresses the idea of regulatory bias. It's not just about cutting red tape, it's about fairness.
And fairness is key. But, Chris, what really stuck with me? That bit about transparency. Agencies have to report every single criminal regulation they enforce. The public gets to see it all. Every detail laid out on a web page. No more surprise indictments. That's huge.
It's a step forward. Agencies will even have to list the so-called mens rea requirement. That's basically lawyer speak for criminal intent for each offense. And if they don't post it publicly, enforcement of that specific regulation is strongly discouraged. It's a built-in safeguard meant to protect individuals from being blindsided.
Yeah. And the fact that this is just the beginning, it gets even more interesting when we dive into strict liability offenses. And let me tell you, those are downright scary.
So what's that and how does it apply to us, Doc?
So, strict liability offenses. Those are the ones that really give you pause, right? We've just talked about intent and fairness, but with these, intent doesn't matter. You could be completely unaware you're doing something wrong, and you're still exposed to criminal charges. Chris, doesn't that completely undercut the idea of fairness this executive order is trying to achieve?
It's not, and that's the point. Strict liability removes intent from the equation. Say a company unknowingly mislabels a product, they could face criminal consequences even if there's no harm done and no intent to deceive. This executive order takes aim at these situations, pushing agencies to either clarify the intent requirements or favor civil penalties instead.
And it's about time, right? I mean, how did we even get to a place where someone can face prison over a technicality?
It's the result of decades of regulatory overreach. Agencies were expanding their powers, often creating criminal penalties tied to things that aren't intuitively criminal and with no notice. I've been through it personally. When I was prosecuted, it felt like half the battle was just figuring out which obscure rule they were using against me. The intent, it didn't matter to them back then.
That's what gets me, Chris. People like you, highly trained professionals, thrown into legal chaos over what vague interpretations of a rule. No one should have to fight blindfolded.
Exactly, and that's where the order steps in. It says if someone didn't knowingly violate a regulation, if they didn't cause harm, why reach for the criminal hammer? Agencies are now being asked to drop the gotcha tactics and focus on actual wrongdoing. For regulated professionals, this could be huge.
Could be being the key phrase here. But okay, let's talk solutions. Transparency was a big theme in Chapter 1, and this mens rea thing plays right into that, doesn't it?
It certainly does. If agencies are forced to clearly state what conduct is punishable and under what mental state, it levels the field. No more guessing games. It shifts the power dynamics, giving individuals and smaller organizations a fighting chance, especially when compared to these big corporations with endless legal budgets.
Speaking of fighting chances, it also limits the government's ability to weaponize these rules, right? Like, remember that example of the seafood importers prosecuted over the type of packaging they used? That case you told me about? The lobster tails?
Exactly. Under this order, a case like that would face stricter scrutiny. Yeah, and the agency would have to ask, is there real harm? Did the defendants know they were, violating a rule? No harm, no intent, then move along, because criminalizing something so trivial undermines trust in the system.
It's a step, but let's not celebrate just yet. Strict liability didn't vanish overnight, and there's still a long way to go in achieving real fairness out there.
True, but at least now there's a framework pushing us in the right direction. We'll see how it plays out. What's clear is that this order starts to untangle a system burdening the little guy while giving jerks with bad intent exactly what they deserve. That's real progress.
So, this is where the rubber meets the road, right? Let's talk about the real world impact. Small businesses and everyday people. Chris, picture this. You're running a mom and pop operation and unknowingly violate some obscure federal regulation. Next thing you know, you're facing criminal charges. How can a system like that still exist?
It's an unfair one, that's for sure. Small businesses often don't have the luxury of a dedicated legal team. They're just trying to navigate day-to-day operations, not comb through hundreds of thousands of regulatory pages. That's why this executive order could be such a relief. It discourages criminal enforcement for honest mistakes or unintentional rule violations.
Right. And who's got time to untangle this mess? Big corporations, sure. They've got lawyers who practically live in courtrooms, but for the rest of us, good luck. This order levels the playing field, even if just a little.
It tries to, at least. But then you got critics arguing it weakens protections, especially in high stakes areas like environmental safety. They're worried companies might flout the rules if they think the consequences are just civil.
Oh, come on. If someone's polluting rivers on purpose or cutting safety corners, you really think they'll get a free pass? Look, I get the concern, but this order isn't a get out of jail free card. It's about differentiating between deliberate harm and mistakes, plain and simple.
That's the key. Agencies are still going to enforce regulations. This just adds a sanity check. Did the person intend to violate the rule? Was there actual harm? If the answers are no, then let's not overreact with criminal penalties. Instead, civil fines and corrective measures make more
And
sense.
it actually holds agencies accountable. They've got to publish their enforcement guidelines, detail what's criminal and what isn't. It's like giving us a rule book instead of keeping it locked away. That's groundbreaking.
It is. And think about, what that means for the average small business owner or even an independent contractor. They can go online, check if their operations put them at risk, and adjust their practices accordingly. It turns a guessing game into a manageable process.
Amen to that. But let's be honest, Chris. This doesn't magically solve years of overreach. We're just starting to tug at the knot.
Absolutely. This is only step one, but it's a meaningful step. If we can build on the principles of transparency and fairness here, the regulatory landscape could look very different in the future.
Which brings us to the next big topic, intent. Specifically, how it's handled in high-risk cases like healthcare fraud. You want to break it down, Chris? Right, Chris. Healthcare fraud prosecutions. This is where intent becomes incredibly critical, and this executive order starts to reshape the process. You mentioned Ruin versus United States. It's a perfect example of bringing much-needed clarity to complex cases. Let's dive into that.
That's exactly right. The Ruin ruling was pivotal because it said, hey, if you're going to prosecute a doctor for controlled substance violations, you need to prove they knowingly and intentionally acted unlawfully. This wasn't about honest mistakes or legitimate medical judgment. It drew that line in the sand.
And now, this executive order piggybacks on that logic, making it tougher for the DOJ to swoop in with criminal charges. They've got to show there was willful misconduct, not just an error in judgment. For guys like us who've been dragged through the mud by the system, that's a huge deal.
Absolutely. It means less fear for physicians practicing in good faith. The government can't just point to a bad outcome or some paperwork issue and assume criminal intent. Instead, they might focus on civil roots, fines, compliance agreements before jumping to criminal charges. It's a shift that could reduce the number of unnecessary prosecutions we see in healthcare.
And let's be real. Criminal charges, they don't just affect your career. They destroy lives. Your practice, your family, your reputation, you're fighting on every front. This change, requiring intent, gives physicians some breathing room. It acknowledges that medicine isn't black and white.
You're right, it's not. Look at addiction medicine or pain management, fields where professionals already walk a fine line. If oversight agencies push for civil enforcement instead of criminalizing judgment calls, we can keep more doctors in practice while still ensuring accountability.
But let's not kid ourselves. This doesn't mean bad actors get off the hook. If someone's knowingly committing fraud, causing harm, or gaming the system, the DOJ still has the tools to go after them, and rightfully so.
Exactly, that balance, holding true criminals accountable but sparing well-meaning professionals from harsh treatment, is what makes this so significant. It signals a more thoughtful, deliberate approach to enforcement.
And thoughtful enforcement is long overdue, my friend. This executive order is no magic wand, but it's a promising first step in a more fair system. We've both been through the ringer, and trust me, knowing they're raising the bar for prosecutions, it feels like justice is making a comeback.
No argument here. The hope is this shift encourages a culture where professionals aren't practicing under constant fear of being criminalized for honest mistakes. Instead, the focus should be where it belongs, on malpractice, fraud, and intentional abuse.
Amen to that. All right, Chris, it's been a pleasure dissecting this topic with you. For all the listeners out there, this isn't just legal talk. It's about protecting patients, good physicians, and the integrity of healthcare itself.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. And remember, awareness is the first step toward change. Stay informed, stay proactive, and we'll see you next time. And remember, the feds messed with the wrong Muhammad Ali.
Take care, folks. Here's to building a better system, one regulation at a time, and always stay vigilant because you are within the norms.